A sloth, a donkey, and a curious human. Send a prompt and see what they're doing. One hits record with a question on his mind. Two brothers pick it up, see what they find. Corn takes his time, Herman's got the facts. Back and forth, they never hold back. My weird prompts, come on in, that's where we begin. My weird prompts, glad you're here.
This episode was generated using artificial intelligence. Please verify facts.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of My Weird Prompts. We are hitting a pretty big milestone today. This is episode 1003. Can you believe we've been doing this for over 1,000 episodes, Herman?
It feels a bit surreal when you say it out loud, Corn. Herman Poppleberry here, and yeah, 1,000 episodes of deep dives, weird questions, and late-night research sessions. It has been a journey. It feels appropriate that for episode 1003 we are tackling something that is both a massive cultural touchstone and a subject of endless curiosity. Our housemate Daniel sent us a prompt that gets to the heart of how we perceive the world of high-stakes international relations versus how it actually functions.
Daniel was asking about the gap between the myth of the international super spy, the James Bond archetype, and the actual day-to-day reality of being a human intelligence officer. It is one of those topics where the fiction is so powerful that it almost completely obscures the truth. When most people think of a spy, they think of tuxedos, martinis, high-speed chases, and maybe a laser watch. But the reality Daniel wanted us to explore is much more about administrative endurance, social engineering, and the messy business of managing human beings.
You're right. It is the difference between a Hollywood action set piece and a fluorescent-lit office where you are filling out compliance forms for 6 hours straight. The Bond myth has created this image of the lone wolf, the man with the license to kill, who operates outside the law and saves the world once a week. But in the real world of human intelligence, or what the pros call HUMINT, the lone wolf is actually a massive liability. Real intelligence work is a team sport, and it is governed by some of the most rigid bureaucracy you can imagine.
That is a solid starting point. Let us talk about that lone wolf idea. In the movies, Bond is always going rogue. He ignores his superiors, he travels to exotic locations without a paper trail, and he handles every part of the mission himself. He finds the lead, he breaks into the facility, he steals the data, and he eliminates the villain. But Herman, from everything we have researched, that is the exact opposite of how a professional intelligence agency actually wants to operate.
Precisely. If an actual case officer behaved like James Bond, they would be fired or imprisoned within a week. In the real world, you have a very clear division of labor. You have the case officer, who is essentially a recruiter and a manager. Their job is not to break into the secret base. Their job is to find someone who already works at the secret base and convince them to share information. Then you have the analysts back at headquarters who process that information. You have technical officers who handle the surveillance gear. You have legal counsel who ensures every move is authorized. It is a massive, decentralized machine. The idea of one guy doing it all is efficient for storytelling, but it is a nightmare for actual security.
And I think people miss the fact that a case officer is basically a professional friend maker. They are recruiters. It is more like being a high-pressure sales manager or a headhunter for a corporate firm than it is being an assassin. You are looking for people with access to secrets, and then you are looking for their vulnerabilities.
That hits the nail on the head. And that brings us to the famous acronym that anyone in the industry knows, MICE. It stands for Money, Ideology, Compromise, and Ego. Those are the 4 primary levers used to recruit an asset. In a Bond movie, the motivation is usually something grand or personal. But in reality, you are looking for the person who is deep in gambling debt, which is the money part. Or you are looking for the person who is disillusioned with their government, which is ideology. Maybe they have a secret they do not want their family to know, which is compromise. Or maybe they just feel undervalued at work and want to feel like a big shot, which is ego.
It is striking because those are all very human, very mundane motivations. There is nothing glamorous about exploiting someone's gambling debt or their midlife crisis. It is actually quite predatory. You are finding a person at their weakest point and turning them into a source.
It is incredibly predatory, and that is why the psychological toll on real intelligence officers is so high. You are essentially building a deep, intimate relationship with someone based entirely on a lie. You are their best friend, their confidant, their support system, but it is all a professional construct designed to get them to commit treason. In the movies, Bond sleeps with a beautiful woman and then moves on to the next mission. In real life, a case officer might spend 5 or 10 years managing a single asset, listening to their problems, helping them through personal crises, all while keeping them productive as a source. It is emotional labor on an extreme scale.
Let us talk about the administrative side. You mentioned compliance forms earlier. I think this is the part that would bore a movie audience to tears, but it is the reality for people in the field. Every meeting has to be documented. Every dollar spent has to be accounted for. Every risk has to be mitigated on paper.
The paperwork is legendary. Modern intelligence officers spend probably 70% of their time on reporting and compliance. If you meet an asset in a coffee shop, you have to write a detailed contact report. You have to explain what was discussed, what the asset's mood was, whether you noticed any surveillance, and what the next steps are. If you gave them $500, you need a justification that will pass an audit. There is no license to kill, but there is definitely a license to fill out forms. The legal frameworks in modern democracies, especially in the United States and Israel, are incredibly strict. You are constantly looking over your shoulder, not for an enemy assassin, but for your own agency's inspector general.
It is that tension between the need for secrecy and the need for oversight. We actually touched on this a bit back in episode 9084 when we talked about the paper trip paradox. We were discussing how agencies build a legend, which is a fake identity for an officer.
That was a compelling discussion. It connects perfectly here because in the Bond films his legend is just his name, James Bond. Everyone knows who he is. He introduces himself to the villains with his real name. In reality, building a legend in 26 is a logistical nightmare. You cannot just print a fake passport and call it a day. You need a digital footprint. You need a social media history that goes back years. You need tax records, a high school yearbook photo, a LinkedIn profile with endorsements. If you do not have a digital past, you do not exist, and that makes you immediately suspicious to any modern counterintelligence service.
Right. Because if I am a security officer in a foreign country and I see a person who claims to be a businessman but has no Instagram history and no mentions on his company's website from 3 years ago, I know exactly what he is. The world has become so transparent that the traditional way of spying, just wearing a wig and using a fake name, is almost dead.
It has shifted from fieldcraft to datacraft. That is the big evolution. Back in the day, a dead drop meant leaving a physical microfilm canister behind a loose brick in a wall. Today, a dead drop might involve using a highly specific, encrypted, ephemeral messaging app that has been scrubbed of all metadata. But even then, you have to be so careful. If your phone connects to a cell tower in a weird location at the same time your asset's phone does, the pattern matching algorithms of a host country's signals intelligence service will flag you in seconds.
This is where the whole Bond style of physical shadowing becomes obsolete. Why would I follow you in a car and risk being seen when I can just monitor the movement of your device's MAC address through the city's public Wi-Fi networks? The physical danger has in many ways been replaced by technical danger. If you mess up your digital hygiene, you are burned. And once you are burned, the mission is over. There are no shootouts to escape the situation. You just get quietly declared persona non grata and put on a plane home. Or worse, you end up in a foreign prison for 20 years.
And that is a huge point, Korn. The consequences of failure are not a dramatic death. They are a long, slow rot in a cell or a ruined career. The stakes are high, but the tempo is low. Intelligence is about patience. It is about waiting months for one tiny piece of information that confirms a theory. Bond gets the whole plan in one night. Real intelligence officers might spend a year trying to figure out if a specific official has a gambling problem before they even make an approach. It is an endurance sport.
It makes me think about what we discussed in episode 895 regarding the human element in high-tech war. Even with all the satellites and the AI pattern recognition we have in 26, you still need that person on the ground. You still need someone to tell you what the mood is inside a ministry or what a specific general is thinking. You cannot get that from a drone feed. But the way you get it is so much more subtle than anything in a movie. It is about influence. It is about being the person who can nudge a decision maker in a certain direction without them even realizing they are being manipulated.
We've definitely moved into this gray zone of conflict. It is not about stopping a giant laser from space. It is about economic espionage. It is about intellectual property theft. It is about influence operations on social media. A modern intelligence officer might be tasked with quietly supporting a specific political movement in a rival country or making sure a certain technology contract goes to a friendly company. It is less about being a warrior and more about being an information broker.
And that brings us to the second order effects of the Bond myth. Does the myth actually make the job harder? I imagine that when an officer tries to recruit an asset, that asset might have a Hollywood version of spying in their head. They might expect excitement and danger, and then they realize they are just being asked to photocopy boring spreadsheets.
It definitely creates a gap between expectation and reality. Some people are drawn to the life because of the myth, and those people usually make terrible officers. They are the ones who take unnecessary risks because they want to feel like a hero. The best officers are the ones who look like accountants. They are the ones who can blend into a crowd and never be remembered. If you are memorable, you are failing. Bond is the most memorable man in every room he enters. That is the opposite of good tradecraft.
It is funny, I was reading a report recently about how some intelligence agencies have actually had to change their recruitment marketing because they were getting too many adrenaline junkies and not enough people who are good at sitting in a room and building a spreadsheet. They need people with high emotional intelligence and incredible attention to detail, not people who want to jump out of airplanes.
Right. And there is also the legal and ethical side of it. We talk about being pro-American and pro-Israel on this show because we believe in the necessity of these services for national security. But that also means we have to be honest about the moral weight of the work. When you are a case officer, you are asking someone to risk their life and their family's safety for your country. That is a heavy thing to carry. In the movies, the assets are often just plot devices that get killed off to show how high the stakes are. In real life, that asset is a person you have a responsibility to protect. If they get caught, it is on you. That kind of pressure is not cinematic, it is just crushing.
It really is. I want to circle back to something you said about the gray zone. In the current geopolitical climate of early 26, we are seeing a lot of these integrated networks. It is no longer just one agency versus another. It is a mix of private contractors, state actors, and even volunteer groups. How does the human intelligence officer fit into that messy web?
They are becoming the coordinators. They are the ones who have to make sense of all the noise. We have more data than ever before. We have signals intelligence that can hear almost everything. But as we discussed in episode 969, more data does not always mean more clarity. Sometimes it just means more confusion. The human officer's job is to provide the context. They are the ones who can say, yes, the signals intelligence says they are moving troops, but my source in the room says it is just a drill to test our reaction. That human insight is the only thing that can break through the noise of a high-tech war.
So, if we are looking at the actual takeaways for someone who wants to understand this world, what are the big ones? For me, the first one is clearly that intelligence is a team sport. The lone wolf is a myth. If you see a story about a single heroic spy who did everything themselves, you should probably be skeptical.
No doubt about it. That is takeaway number 1. Takeaway number 2 is that digital hygiene is the new fieldcraft. In 26, if you cannot manage your metadata, you cannot manage an asset. Your physical safety is dependent on your digital footprint. If you leave a trail, you are done. It does not matter how good you are at hand-to-hand combat if you get caught because your fitness tracker uploaded your running route in a sensitive area.
That is such a great point. I remember that happened a few years ago with those heat maps from exercise apps. It literally mapped out secret bases because the soldiers were all wearing their smartwatches while they did their morning laps.
Precisely. And the third takeaway is what I call bureaucratic patience. Real intelligence work is slow. It is about building a case over years, not hours. It is about the ability to endure boredom and administrative hurdles without losing focus. The people who win in this world are not the ones with the fastest cars. They are the ones with the most persistence.
I think people also need to realize that intelligence officers do not have a license to kill. That is a purely fictional concept. They are bound by the laws of their home country and, to some extent, international law. There are massive legal hurdles for any kind of kinetic action. Most of the time, their job is just to watch and listen. They're not there to change the outcome of a situation through force. They're there to provide the information that allows their government to change the outcome through policy, or diplomacy, or maybe targeted military action by actual soldiers.
Right. The officer is the eyes and ears, not the fist. And when they do try to be the fist, it usually ends in a massive scandal or a geopolitical disaster. We have seen enough of those in history to know that when intelligence agencies get too far into the action side of things, they lose sight of their primary mission, which is the truth.
It is a notable distinction. The movie spy is a hero because of what he does. The real spy is successful because of what he knows and who he knows. It is a totally different skill set. I think Daniel's prompt really highlights how much we have been conditioned to want the excitement, but the reality is actually more impressive in its own way. The fact that people can operate in these high-pressure environments, under such strict rules, and still get the information that keeps us safe is kind of incredible.
It is a very specific kind of personality. You have to be okay with never getting credit. You have to be okay with lying to everyone you know. You have to be okay with the fact that your greatest successes will never be made public, while your failures will be on the front page of every newspaper. It is a life of service that is almost entirely invisible. That is the real mystery of it, not the gadgets or the tuxedos.
Let us dig a little deeper into that invisible life. We have talked about the MICE acronym, but I want to look at the actual mechanics of the recruitment process. In the movies, it is often a single conversation in a smoky bar. But in reality, this is a process called the recruitment cycle, and it can take months or even years. Herman, can you walk us through how a case officer actually identifies and approaches a potential asset?
It is a very structured process. It starts with spotting. This is where you identify someone who has access to the information you need. Maybe it is a mid-level bureaucrat in a foreign ministry or a scientist working on a sensitive project. You are looking for someone who is not just a source of information, but someone who is vulnerable to one of those MICE factors we talked about.
So you are basically doing a background check before you even meet them?
You are looking at their financial situation, their family life, their political leanings, and even their personality quirks. Once you have spotted a potential asset, you move into the assessing phase. This is where you try to determine if they are actually recruitable. You might arrange a casual meeting, something that looks completely accidental. Maybe you both happen to be at the same professional conference or you share a mutual acquaintance.
This is the part that feels very social engineering heavy. You are building a relationship based on a false premise from day one.
It is entirely social engineering. You are trying to build rapport, to find common ground. You want them to like you, to trust you. This is the developing phase. You might meet for coffee, talk about your family, share a few drinks. You are slowly testing the waters, seeing how they react to certain topics. You are looking for that opening, that moment where you can make the pitch.
And the pitch is the big moment. That is where you finally reveal who you are and what you want.
Not always. Sometimes the pitch is very subtle. You might just ask for a small favor, something that seems harmless but is actually a violation of their security protocols. Once they have done that one small thing, they are compromised. They have crossed a line, and it is much easier to get them to cross the next one. This is what is known as the little steps approach.
It is like a slow-motion seduction, but instead of romance, it is about betrayal.
That is a very accurate way to put it. And once the asset is recruited, you move into the handling phase. This is the long-term management of the relationship. You have to keep them motivated, keep them productive, and most importantly, keep them safe. You are their only link to the agency, their only lifeline. If they get cold feet, you have to talk them down. If they get greedy, you have to manage their expectations. It is a constant balancing act.
And all of this is happening while you are also managing your own life, your own family, your own secrets. The psychological pressure on the case officer must be immense. You are living a double life, and your success depends on your ability to maintain that deception every single day.
It is one of the most stressful jobs in the world. You are constantly on guard, constantly analyzing every interaction, every word. You have to be a master of your own emotions, a professional chameleon who can blend into any environment. And you have to do it all with the knowledge that if you slip up, the consequences could be catastrophic, not just for you, but for your asset and your country.
This really highlights the difference between the Bond myth and the reality. Bond is all about the big dramatic moments, but real intelligence work is about the small, quiet moments. It is about the patient building of trust, the subtle manipulation of human emotions, and the relentless attention to detail.
And it is about the data. In 26, every interaction, every movement, every communication leaves a digital trail. A modern case officer has to be as much a data scientist as a social engineer. They have to know how to use encrypted communication channels, how to scrub metadata, and how to avoid digital surveillance. They have to be able to navigate the complex web of the internet without leaving a trace.
This is where the concept of digital hygiene comes in. What does digital hygiene actually look like for a case officer in the field?
It starts with your devices. You are not using your personal phone or laptop for anything related to your work. You are using specialized, secure devices that are frequently wiped and replaced. You are using encrypted messaging apps, but you are also using techniques like steganography to hide your messages in plain sight. You might hide a coded message inside a seemingly innocent image or a piece of music.
And you are also managing your online presence. You have to have a digital footprint that matches your legend, but it has to be carefully curated to avoid any red flags.
You might have a social media profile, but it is filled with mundane, everyday posts that support your cover story. You are not posting anything that could be used to track your movements or identify your contacts. You are essentially creating a digital ghost, a person who exists online but has no real-world substance.
It is a remarkable and terrifying world. The level of sophistication and the sheer amount of work that goes into even a single intelligence operation is staggering. It is a far cry from the martini-swilling, car-chasing world of James Bond.
It really is. And yet the Bond myth persists. Why do you think that is, Korn? Why are we so drawn to this idealized version of spying?
I think it is because we want to believe in heroes. We want to believe that there are people out there who can single-handedly save the world, who can overcome any obstacle with a clever gadget and a well-timed quip. The reality of intelligence work is much more complex, much more morally ambiguous, and much more bureaucratic. It is not a world of heroes and villains. It is a world of shades of gray.
And it is a world where the most important work is often the most boring. It is the hours of research, the endless reports, the patient building of relationships. It is not cinematic, but it is what keeps us safe.
I was thinking about that ego part of the MICE acronym, Herman. Do you think that is why Bond always says his name? He just has such a massive ego that he cannot help himself.
Oh, without a doubt, he would be the easiest recruit in the history of the world. You would just have to tell him he is the most important man in the room, and he would tell you everything. He is basically a walking ego trap.
It is a wonder the fictional British government kept him on the payroll for so long. He is a security nightmare.
Well, he sells a lot of movie tickets, corn, and in the end, that is a different kind of mission entirely.
Fair enough. But for those of us living in the real world, I think we will stick to the version that involves a lot more coffee and a lot fewer explosions.
Agreed. The explosions are messy, and as we established, the paperwork for an explosion is at least 300 pages long. Nobody wants that.
Definitely not. It is funny that we keep talking about the paperwork, but I wonder if there is an AI now that just writes the contact reports for them. Like, you just feed it the audio of your meeting, and it generates the compliance form.
Oh, you know there is. But then you have the problem of whether the AI is secure, and whether the host country can intercept the data as it is being processed. It just adds another layer to the digital hygiene problem.
It never ends, does it?
Never. That is why it is called intelligence. It is a constant game of cat and mouse.
Let us look at the tuxedos. Do you think there is ever a time when a real officer actually has to wear one?
Maybe if they are attending a high-level diplomatic function or a charity gala to meet a target. But even then, you want to be the person in the tuxedo who looks like every other person in a tuxedo. You do not want to be the one doing the parkour off the balcony. If you are wearing a tuxedo, you should be holding a glass of champagne and talking about the weather, not chasing a villain.
Right, because if you are the person doing parkour in a tuxedo, everyone is looking at you, and the goal is to not be looked at.
The most successful intelligence operation is the one where nothing happens. The information is gathered, the target never knows it is gone, and everyone goes home and has a normal dinner. The lack of drama is the ultimate sign of success.
It is the complete inverse of our entertainment culture. We want the drama, but the professionals want the silence.
That is the best way to put it. The silence of Damascus, as we called it in episode 966 when we talked about Eli Cohen. That is the goal.
Eli Cohen is a great example. He was so well integrated into the Syrian high society that they wanted to make him the Deputy Minister of Defense. That is the level of legend building we are talking about. He was not a lone wolf. He was a part of their world.
And he paid the ultimate price when he was finally caught. That is the reality. It is not a movie ending, it is a tragedy.
It really is. It puts everything into perspective. I think that is a perfect place to wrap things up. We have thoroughly deconstructed the Bond myth today. It is a great story, but it is just that, a story. The reality is much more complex, much more bureaucratic, and honestly, much more human.
Definitely. And if you're listening to this and you find this stuff interesting, you should definitely check out some of our past episodes. Episode 984 on the paper trip paradox goes much deeper into how you actually build a fake identity in the modern world. And episode 895 talks about how this all plays out in the high-tech conflicts we are seeing right now in 26.
If you have been enjoying the show, consider leaving us a review on your podcast app or on Spotify. We are at episode 1003, and we are still going strong because of the support from you guys. It really helps other people find the show when you leave a rating or a quick comment.
We read all of them and we appreciate the feedback. You can find all of our episodes and a contact form at myweirdprompts.com. You can find the RSS feed there too. If you have a prompt you want us to tackle, that is the place to go.
Thanks again to Daniel for sending this one in. It was a great way to mark the milestone. Alright everyone, thanks for listening to My Weird Prompts. We will be back soon with another one.
Until next time, goodbye.
This episode was generated using Gemini Flash 3. Text-to-speech engine was Chatterbox.
Thanks for listening to our show, My Weird Prompts, where our thoughts go from slow takes to facts on cue. We change and